Started with 14, and then there were eight. NFL divisional round is upon us. And Amir, you're joining us. You've been here since like week 6, and we're all the way here with just a few weeks left remaining. But how you doing here on this Thursday morning?
I'm good. This week, man, was all messed up. We had some upsets, some surprising losses, but that's what football's all about. All about, the best people in the world competing every single day. And so, I'm excited to dive into this episode.
Yeah, this is where legends are made, is a good way to put it. But without further ado, let's get into it here. As last week, it was ugly. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything
Yeah.
here. It was definitely ugly. The both of us, 2-4, as we had the same exact predictions. And that might happen this week. It might not. We'll have to get into that in a moment. But on the season, I'm guessing at about a 68% correct rate. I think you're not too far behind at about a 66. But let's start off here. We're not going to waste any time. The first divisional round playoff matchup is between the Baltimore Ravens, of course, coming off of their first round bye and a loss to end their regular season. Of course, they rested some starters, but they are taking on the Houston Texans, a team that many thought weren't going to win last week against the Cleveland Browns, but they did, and they did it convincingly, especially in that second half. But the Texans come in here with an 11-7 record on the year. Amir, your early thoughts about this matchup. Can CJ Stroud continue this magic going forward against a tough Ravens defense?
And he definitely could. And obviously the Texans lost to Baltimore in week 1 in the first game of his career. But this Ravens team, they're well rested. It took 2 weeks off, and Lamar hasn't played in 3 weeks, which is definitely concerning. Seeing that a lot of times when guys take weeks off like that and get into it, it's kind of tough. And I think the best way for the Texans to have somewhat of a shot to win this game is to keep Lamar in the pocket. Obviously, you can't run man to man against Baltimore, because it allows him to use his legs a lot. But if this pass rush could do what they did last week and start off hot, that's the key is starting off hot. They can start off hot like they did last week. They could have a shot at beating Baltimore. But I think Baltimore just has too much, to overwhelm them. And CJ Stroud isn't going to be able to sit in the pocket comfortable like he did last week.
Yeah, you mentioned it you mentioned it just there that these teams met in week 1. Of course, CJ Stroud's rookie debut of his NFL career. Of course, the Baltimore Ravens won that game 25-9. CJ Stroud was sacked 5 times in that game, and it just wasn't a pretty game, of course, from the first game rookie. But the big difference here, and I'm going to spoil it here. I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens, right? No shocker here. But the Ravens this year have as many interceptions as passing touchdowns allowed throughout the remainder of the year. 18 for both ends. So I mean, it's just really this Ravens defense, I think, is just too much. And you take Roquan Smith off this defense. Let's say you just have the defense from a couple of years ago. I think I'm taking the Texans in this matchup. But when you have maybe the best middle linebacker or linebacker in the game, period, I think a player that special can really be all the difference. But I just think that the Texans are going to have to air the ball out against this defense that, again, is just as good as getting interceptions as allowing touchdowns. So I will take the Baltimore Ravens here, but and looks like you would do the same. But I do want to throw this out there. It's just I do like how the NFL this year, there's somewhat parity, among the 8 teams left, as you can really make an argument in any matchup of this team can win this weekend because of this. And I think there's good reasons, outside of it, not just, of course, fandom, right? But I like the Texans. I mean, if they can get hot like they did last week, if their defense can play with that same energy, Lamar has not had the greatest playoff track record. You can convince yourself that, hey, the Texans got a shot in this matchup. But regardless, I will take the Ravens here to finally get over that hump and win Lamar a playoff matchup. Then we were going to move over to the second Saturday matchup. Of course, both one seeds decided they wanted to play on Saturday, but the Saturday night matchup is between the San Francisco 49ers, 13-4, also coming off of their first round bye. And unlike other years, Amir, this team is healthy. Unlike it seems like every other year this team has been under Kyle Shanahan. This year they finally figured out the medical side of things. But they're hosting the Green Bay Packers, a team that was the first 7 seed to ever win a playoff game behind the excellence of Jordan Love, who will be the greatest Packers quarterback in NFL history. Um, anyway, the Packers, it was refreshing to see, them win that game last week and in convincing fashion, putting up 48 points against the tough, or what we thought was a tough Cowboys defense. But this weekend, they have an even tougher matchup, of course, as a 7th seed. You're never going to have an easy game on the road yet again in San Fran, but this time they have Chase Young. Amir, your thoughts here about this matchup as, again, you could convince yourself Green Bay could pull off the upset.
Yeah, Green Bay's playing excellent football. Jordan Love's playing elite, just like you just mentioned. But in my eyes, San Fran has way too much firepower. I think they're going to dominate the run game. The biggest concern is Green Bay's pass rush at times. I think San Fran can get to the quarterback. But the one thing I would say about San Fran, the biggest threat in the NFC is themselves. We've seen it. Their 4 losses, they lost, themselves. Also, if you can block San Fran's pass rush in their 4 losses, you've seen them lose. If you can block them, you can beat them. And I
Yeah.
think that's going to be key. If Green Bay could find ways to protect J Love in the pocket, I feel like he can do enough to cover up the secondary to somewhat, stay in this game.
Yeah. I mean,
But
me and
I'm,
you
I'm taking
talk.
San Fran.
Oh, you're taking San Fran. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, me and you mentioned it a lot throughout the season that San Fran, of course, their biggest enemies themselves, but also the fact that they start off games slow. And some of
Yeah.
these games, they have to fight back and they have to be this dominant team from the second quarter on. And I think that's really the key in this game because if Green Bay can get up early, then I think it's definitely a 50-50 game because, Green Bay is going to be playing with the lead and they have a high-powered passing offense. And of course, San Fran's never easy in the playoffs when you're coming back or coming from behind, is a good way to put it. I think the key in this game, though, is like if Green Bay gets up early, how well can they run the ball? Because San Fran this year, Amir, I saw a stat, they're 10-0 when they've allowed 100 or less rushing yards in a game. And I think Aaron Jones, of course, had an amazing wild card weekend last week. But can he continue that magic against a defense that doesn't allow rushing yards? I think it's going to be a lot of questions here, but all in all, I think it all results back into the favor of the maroon and gold or red and gold, whatever whatever shade of red they want to go by. But we are both taking the number one seeds here. Nothing, shocking so far. And 6 games in, or well, I guess this would be 8 games in, Amir, and we have not differed on one game yet. Hopefully, that changes along the line. But then we move over to Sunday, where we have the Detroit Lions at 13-5. Picked up a very impressive win last week, Amir, against the LA Rams, and that was one of the best playoff games I think we've seen in a long time, just from start to finish. Of course, you have your thoughts about a top 5 receiver in that matchup. I have my opinions elsewhere, but it was a really good matchup from start to finish, and the Lions picked up their first playoff win since 1991. So the Lions, of course, are riding a high. But then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of people wrote them off. Maybe they didn't write back like Geno Smith, but they took down the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that was trying to defend their NFC crown, and they weren't able to do that. Tampa Bay went in there with Baker Mayfield with the confidence that they have, and they got the job done. And now they're on the road in Detroit. I think it's a very interesting matchup again. I'm going to keep saying it. It's another matchup where you can convince yourself one way or the other. But I will say these teams met, I think, in week 6 or early in the season. Detroit won that game by 2 scores, and Jared Goff had like 353 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra had 12 catches, 150 yards, and like 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I think everything leans in Detroit's favor here. And as much as I don't want to continue to take the high seeds, I'm going to do that here. But your thoughts here about this matchup here, Amir, and maybe that top 5 receiver in last week's matchup?
Yeah, that top 5 receiver you're talking about is Puka Nacua. I'm on the hype train for him. I thought that game was 50-50. It could have went either way. I thought a couple big calls kind of, favored Detroit to kind of win that game. But the biggest struggle was, Los Angeles not being able to score in the red zone, which we saw. But going back to this game here, I'm taking Detroit here, the higher seed, which I don't want to do because we keep on doing it week by week. But I mean, the matchup just looks too good right now, and
They're a
I
different team
think
when
if
they're
Tampa
home.
Bay, huh?
They're a different team when they're home. They play a lot better.
Exactly, they put a lot more confidence, and so looking at this game, if Tampa Bay wants the chance to win this game, they need to put pressure on Jared Goff, and Baker cannot turn this football over or it's game over. And the thing that we saw kind of last week with Tampa Bay is their front 7 and pass rush are finally starting to get the full strength, full health, which is a great sign. But if I'm Tampa Bay, if you can find a way to air the ball out a bunch and target Detroit's corners without turning the ball over, you can really win this game. I mean, because we're seeing week in and week out, this Detroit secondary is very concerning. And Tampa Bay has a shot, but I'm still taking Detroit here. I mean, they're just too overwhelming.
Yeah, no, I think well, you touched on it there at the very beginning about red zone scoring. Tampa Bay is one of the worst in the league at
Exactly.
scoring in the red zone. So I think it's another matchup where it goes in the favor of Detroit. And again, like we mentioned there, they're a different team at home, but never could I have imagined you picking Detroit in a playoff game? I think we had an argument in a group chat a long time ago where I said Detroit would go farther than what was it, Baltimore?
I think it
Baltimore or
was Baltimore.
Dallas?
Yeah.
If it was Baltimore, I think if I'm hoping to I'm a big CJ Stroud fan this weekend because I think Detroit's gonna win, and I think you guys have to eat your words if Detroit goes farther than Baltimore in the NFL playoffs. But we're both gonna take Detroit here. 9 games in, we're taking the same team. But again, I mean, I forgot to mention early in the episode, by the way, last year, Amir, of course, you saw last week, I had an 11-2 record in the playoffs. This year, not only is that record, I can't beat that record or match it, but I have double the losses this year already than last year in the
Crazy.
entirety of it. Crazy wild card weekend kind of puts it into perspective, right? Um, but then we talk about the maybe definitely the must-see matchup this weekend. It's an all-time classic matchup. This is your Brady and Manning matchup of our generation. It is Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs, I think, have won 3 straight games against this Bills team in the postseason, and Josh Allen just hasn't been able to get over the hump when it comes to beating Patrick Mahomes. Last year, they had the lead up 3 with 13 seconds left, and Patrick Mahomes, or I think that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He was up. Was up 3. Basically, he gave Mahomes 13 seconds, and Mahomes did what Mahomes does and got them over the hump in overtime. I just think this is one of those matchups for Buffalo. I'm going to let you dive into it here, but this is a new look Buffalo team because unlike the first 3 matchups, they have a new offensive coordinator, and they're not relying on Josh Allen through the air as much as they always have. But your thoughts and maybe prediction here about this matchup?
Just like you just said, the fact that they're not relying on Josh Allen is scary. And I mean, the biggest concern about Buffalo is the linebackers. I mean, like the question is, can they stop the run this week? Because Pacheco's coming. For a fact, Casey's going to try to do the best to beat them in time of possession this week. And looking at this matchup, I'm still going to take Buffalo because one, they're at home. I think this is the time Josh Allen could finally get his team over the hump. And just seeing Buffalo being able to dominate teams. Beating KC earlier in the year and being even better right now than they were at that point. And I think Buffalo can just, win this game. I'm saying less than a 5-point game, and it's going to be
Right.
close. It's going to
Yeah.
be close.
I wonder what the weather's going to look like there in Buffalo. If it's going to look like it did last week, or if it's going to get at least a little bit better. I don't think it favors either team because both teams are used to those
Yeah.
conditions. However, I do want to throw out some stats here. Of course, I always bring some for the for each playoff matchup. Patrick Mahomes is 10-2 as a starter in his postseason career, but this is his first career start on the road
On the road,
in
yeah, on the
in the
road.
postseason, which is insane. This man has won 2 Super Bowls, been to 3, and of course, the one Super Bowl he lost was to the greatest player of all time, and Tom Brady. This dude doesn't lose much, and what we've learned over the last couple of years is you do not bet against Patrick Mahomes. I,
Exactly.
I'm gonna say Kansas City because Kadarius Toney is returning. I'm gonna stick here with
Who?
Buffalo. I'm just joking. I'm gonna go with Kansas City. I did this. I'll say this. Coming into the weekend, me and you had the same exact stuff. Well, I don't want to spoil that. But we had a lot of the same answers, right? A lot of the same input
Yeah.
for this upcoming weekend. And I was like, I did originally have Buffalo. Let me tell you, 20 minutes ago before we started the pod, I had Buffalo in this spot. But one thing I had to remind myself of is last year I bet against Patrick Mahomes when I took Joe Burrow, and he reminded me, hey, I'm still the best player in the world. I think when you have the best player in the world, you always have a chance. And I think this is a perfect game for Travis Kelce to finally turn back the clock to last year, not 2 years ago, just last year. I think Kadarius Toney finally needs a game where he could be relevant. I think Pacheco, like you mentioned, especially if it's a snowy game, I think he could get going and it can get scary. So I think one thing I've learned as a football fan, you don't bet against Patrick Mahomes, just like you don't bet against Tom Brady. So for the sake of being different, though, I will go with the Chiefs. But to clarify, I had the Bills here at first. So Amir, there we go. At least we know going into next week we're not going to have the same exact record.
Exactly.
But then we get into our power rankings. And I think, when we talk about the Elite Eight, of course, this is where legends are made. And without further ado, let's get into it. As at number 8 here, we both have a team that just knocked off the reigning NFC champions, a team that was one penalty call away in the Super Bowl last year from winning it all, the Philadelphia Eagles. And we talked about Tampa Bay there They look good, and they just feel different with with Baker Mayfield at the helm. And your thoughts here about them as they both move up 5 spots in our rankings?
I think they're by far the worst team in the playoffs up to this point. And if I'm still ranking, the playoffs as a whole, I still think they're the second, the second to worst team,
Yeah.
to be in the playoffs. But they're playing up to this level, so I have them at 8. And I mean, it's not really much to say. I just think every team that's over them is that much better.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you can be really good at this point. I don't want to discredit Tampa Bay,
Yeah,
but number 7, we both have the Green Bay Packers. As much as I love Jordan Love, no pun intended, I couldn't put him any higher until no. I'll say this: if they beat San Fran this weekend, if they beat San Fran, they're a top 3 team to me going
Whew.
forward, just because of that momentum and confidence boost going forward. Especially if he could do something that Aaron Rodgers hasn't done in his career, which is beat
Yeah.
San Francisco in the playoffs. So to me, though, Jordan Love and this team is playing fantastic. Jaden Reed is slowly turning into one of those underrated superstar level wide receivers. But your thoughts here about the green and gold?
Yeah, this Packers team, I say them and the next spot are kind of interchangeable. Um, No, man. I mean, this team is surprising. I mean, their receiving core is slightly above average. It's not even an elite receiving core, and they're still just dotting teams up. Like seeing last week, seeing what they're capable of. It's kind of like I'm in kind of a worse situation because we know for a fact Dallas is used to being frauds, but I mean this Green Bay team looked way too good to overlook. I think if they beat San Fran, man,
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, Jordan Love, it's going to be like a man in a franchise the way that he turned this
yeah,
franchise around and won them a Super Bowl. I think saying top 3 is not really doing them any justice because there's only 4 teams that advance. So I'm going to say this: if Green Bay wins this weekend, they're a top 2 team in my books going into conference title weekend. But then we talk about number 6, the team that just beat the Cleveland Browns, and they have a chance to beat another AFC North rival, or of course another AFC North team in the Baltimore Ravens. CJ Stroud and the crew, high-powered passing offense. They're going to be a fun team on both sides of the ball, and of course Lamar doesn't have the biggest track record in the playoffs. But your thoughts here about the Texans pulling off a big win? Some would say an upset in the first round. Why are they not a top 5 team for you?
Yeah, I mean, this Texas team, just like I saw the top 5 based off of, what we've seen from those 5 teams, them being more consistent throughout the season and them having, bigger difference makers. But, I'm putting them over top of Green Bay just for the simple fact that, man, their defense last week looked
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
And, they're definitely far better than Green Bay's. I understand Green Bay in the second half was playing prevent, playing a little passive, but, I mean, if Dallas's defense could somewhat, step it up in that second half, I believe Dallas is somewhat coming back into that game. Houston against Cleveland, it was all gas, no breaks. They started off hot and they dominated from start to finish. And I think, this Houston team matches up better, against Baltimore and against San Fran, against these top teams, more than Green Bay and Tampa Bay does.
When it comes to the playoffs, I love that about teams when it's all gas, no breaks. Regular season, I
Yeah,
get it. Take your foot off the pedal. You don't have anything to prove. If you won the game, just get your win and go on to next week. But when it comes to the playoffs, man, these are the playoffs. This is the best against the best. And if I can blow your team out by 30, I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave my guys on the field, and we're going to do that. We're going to leave a statement. But like you mentioned there, Green Bay's defense did allow 500 yards in that prevent style defense. But then we get into the top 5. Amir, it has been the same top 2 for about 5 weeks now. Who is the number 1 and number 2 team here in the NFL?
Baltimore and San Fran.
Baltimore and San Fran. That has been our top 1 and 2 for the last couple of weeks. There's no reason to change them. Of course,
Yeah.
I gave you the option, of course, when you're filling out your slides, but you kept your slides here, and until it changes, we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep spoiling like 1 and 2. I guess it's not really a spoiler, but let's get into our number 5, right? So number 5, of course, we have Buffalo. We have some other teams left that have not coming to mind. At number 5, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. You have them jumping up 4 spots, me 3 from 8 to number 5. But Kansas City, to me, it really comes down to it. This team is a different team when it comes to playoff time, just like multiple teams in the NBA, just like in the teams in other sports. These teams just have, they can flip that switch and they can get into that mode. And again, they have the best player on the planet in Patrick Mahomes, a future first ballot Hall of Famer. And I mean, if he can go out this year with this team and win another Super Bowl back-to-back, something a team hasn't done since the early 2000s, we're gonna start talking about this man seriously as if he is the GOAT, carrying this team to a Super Bowl victory. But as of right now, I think they're the fifth best team. They have a chance this weekend. I picked them this weekend, but I think as a football team, their opponent this weekend just a little bit better. But your thoughts here about the Kansas City Chiefs?
Man, if Mahomes was to pull this run off, then man, like we're gonna have a serious convo with him and Brady already. And, I'm not over exaggerating, but the fact that this Kansas City team is worse than
Ever.
any championship Patriots team ever, and it's not even close. The defense as well, but offensively, they are lacking. And I have them at 5. Just based off of the fact, they're lacking so much talent, offensively. That's been the biggest struggle all year long. Despite Travis Kelce having 80 yards receiving last week, he still dropped like 4 passes.
Yeah.
Crucial drops, and that's been the biggest problem. And, going into the rest of the playoffs, like their pass protection on the outside, at their tackles, has been another major issue. I think that's going to catch up to them this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And at number 4, the Detroit Lions, man. The Detroit Lions, to me, of course they beat the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1. Of course, some injuries were in play there, but I think they beat they had the best overall matchup last week against the the LA Rams. And it was the only game last weekend that wasn't decided by 14 plus points. So it came down to the wire. Tough matchup throughout the entire way. Matt Stafford was amazing. Luka Nakuya, of course, also had an amazing day. But I think the Lions, to me, very impressive win last week, and we've been looking for that very impressive win from start to finish. They have that, and I think they're a top 4 team heading into this weekend. And of course, we both have them pulling out the win. But your thoughts here on the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, the Lions are at 4. I think they're the 4th best team up to this point. Their team is absolutely loaded, and the fact that like they're going to be playing at home again this week. In my mind, they're pretty much guaranteed to the NFC Championship. But if Green Bay was to upset San Fran, this week, man, the Lions are going to have a legitimate shot at winning their first Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think if Green Bay wins next week or this week, I'm probably gonna take them over Detroit. As crazy as that sounds, just because I like Jordan Love that much. But guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, 2 of my favorite players in the league. Again, random players, but I just really like these players. So I really hope, for the sake of those 2 guys, I hope that Detroit and for their fans, of course, their city, they can pull it off and of course bring home their first Super Bowl. But then at number 3, we both have the Buffalo Bills. They've remained here for the last 2 or 3 weeks. This is a team that, again, the new offensive coordinator, they're, I guess, new look, even though they have the same roster. It was just that midseason change. Something so small on paper made such a big difference. And again, Josh Allen has preserved his greatness, his arm, and to the point now where he's fresh going into an Elite 8 round, of course, into the divisional round. And I just think that, we saw last week, it doesn't need to be with his arm to get the job done. And he had one of the greatest playoff performances of all time. But your thoughts here about the Buffalo Bills before we close off here?
You just mentioned that it doesn't have to be with his arm. That's why I'm not a fan of the narrative of him throwing too many interceptions. At the end of the day, he still has 40 plus total touchdowns, and still has the same amount of turnovers as guys like Hurts, guys like Mahomes. Those other top quarterbacks. And the fact that he can dominate, truly dominate on the ground, and he's not just tush pushing like Hurts, all these other guys. Like the fact that he can actually pose a threat. This Buffalo offense is on a whole other level.
Yeah.
And, them making that change was the greatest thing they ever could have done, because now, their chances to win it all are, through the roof.
But that is our top 8 going into this weekend. Of course, only 3 rounds left of football, and then that's it. That's it for us until the 2025 season. But without further ado, let's just recap here before we get out of here. We have the Baltimore Ravens and San Francisco 49ers at 1 and 2, the Buffalo Bills at 3, the Detroit Lions at 4, Kansas City Chiefs at 5, and at 6, we have the Houston Texans, 7, the Green Bay Packers, and 8, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Crew. Again, so many talented teams this weekend. So if your team's a little bit lower than you think, of course, don't take it to heart too much, right? But then let's get into our last screen here before we get out of here. Again, quicker episode today, but that's just what happens when we get later in the season. We have lesser games, so less things to talk about. But let's talk about the upset of the week here. You have the Houston Texans over the Baltimore Ravens. If you want to dive into that too much, I know we already kind of talked about it, but your thoughts there about Houston maybe getting the upset this weekend?
Yeah, so I talked about Lamar earlier. Taking 3 weeks off. And, that's kind of concerning, going in, taking 3 weeks off and all that stuff. And, I think for Houston, seeing how well their pass rush is playing, seeing how, the linebacker core, D-line is all at full strength, seeing how last week, they pressured Flacco, changes the entirety of the game. I think if they can keep Lamar in the pocket this week, I want to see Lamar throwing around 40%, to sit in the pocket. You know, pretty much don't allow him to, extend these plays with his legs. Make him sit there, get comfortable, down the field. I think they have a legitimate chance at winning this game.
Absolutely. And then for me, I have the Green Bay Packers over the San Francisco 49ers. Funny enough, both of us have these lower seeds taking down the 1 seeds in each conference. Of course, San Fran has their problems starting early. Lamar, not the greatest playoff track record. So again, I think like we mentioned earlier in the episode, you can really make an argument for any team this weekend, and it's really logical. You don't have to go too far fetched for some of these reasons behind finding an upset. But then let's talk about a hot take. I guess I'll have you explain yours here.
So for my hot take, for our upsets of the week, we just put, these lower seeds beating the 1 seeds. And so for mine, at least one or both of these 1 seeds are going to lose this week. I don't know which one is going to be, but, and my gut is telling me at least one of them, it's going to happen. And, I think the Texans are in a favorable spot to take down Baltimore. But you could really make a legitimate debate that Green Bay can beat San Fran this week. So it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I really hope, of course, I made the predictions already, but I really hope that both of these teams win this weekend because I would just love, a Final Four of, let's just say, Tampa Bay and Green Bay on the in the NFC, and in the AFC we have Houston and let's say Kansas City, right, or Buffalo because they haven't been there in a long time. I think it just set up a very interesting weekend. But then my hot take on the week is that Jordan Love's going to have 4 touchdowns this weekend. You heard it. I think, of course, San Fran starts off early, or they start off bad. They start off slow in all of these games this season. There's a few where they just get out early and they get up big and they kind of coast the rest of the way. But when they're playing a competent team, sometimes they have the tendency to start off slow. So I think if Green Bay this week can get off to the right foot, start the game off like they did last week, where they have their 12 to 15 scripted plays to start the game. If they can score 2 touchdowns out of those plays, again, it's a tall ask against the San Francisco 49ers, but the Dallas defense is up there with San Fran, and they did that against the Dallas Cowboys last week. So I think if they can start off the game hot, I think Jordan Love's going to have to be in a shootout the rest of the way to maintain the lead because they don't have the talent like San Fran. And I'm going to have Jordan Love getting 4 touchdowns this weekend, whether win or lose. I think Jordan Love's going to have a legacy game for the Green Bay Packers. When we talk about the player of the week, though, who are you going with this weekend? In my opinion, maybe my favorite receiver in the NFL, a top 5 receiver in the NFL. No debate about it, in my opinion. But your thoughts here, and who is your player of the week?
So my player of the week is going to be Amari Cooper. No, I'm playing. It's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think, he's going to be a repeat of what he did earlier in the season. I mean, this Bucs secondary isn't ready at all. They have been playing better. They played better, this past week. But Amon-Ra's going to have a field day.
Yeah. No, I mean, 12 receptions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the first matchup against the Bucs. Can't go wrong with Amon-Ra St. Brown. The sun god, of course, came out of nowhere, and now he's a superstar. My player of the week, I think you see a trend here. We're going to go with Jordan Love. I think win or loss, you can still be the player of the week. And I think Jordan Love, to me, if he's putting up 4 touchdowns, if he's keeping them in the game against the Niners, who look unbeatable for the most part in the majority of the season, I think, you got to give him his flowers. So, again, if you put up 4 touchdowns against the Niners, and if you win the game, especially, I don't care if Jordan Love has 4 interceptions and loses the game. If he wins the game against the Niners and gets this team to the NFC title game, I think he's no doubt the player of the week. But then we talk about the Super Bowl favorite. Who is your Super Bowl favorite going into this weekend?
San Francisco. I talked about it a couple of weeks back. I think if San Fran, makes it to the NFC and they end up playing Baltimore, I don't see them losing against Baltimore.
Yeah.
And, and all the teams, that's, pretty much opposed to Baltimore. Like, let's say if KC made it, or let's say if, Buffalo made it, San Fran literally matches up better than all of those teams.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I'm going to have to disagree with you. I don't think San Fran's that good. And when we look at Baltimore, they don't have a good track record in the playoffs. Josh Allen, he's never been able to beat Mahomes. Mahomes doesn't have enough talent. Houston, they're young. They're not going to get the job done. Detroit, I mean, have they ever won anything relevant besides last week? They haven't. So I'm going to go down to a team that is going to win the Super Bowl this year. The Green Bay Packers. You know, they have
Wow.
maybe the best quarterback in Packers history in Jordan Love. You know, I just think
Wow.
of course, a little bit of satire, a little bit of joking here, but I think if San Fran doesn't win it, right, and I do want to throw this out there in being full seriousness, um, I'm doing this kind of as a prediction. I think if Green Bay wins this weekend against San Fran, you then beat the number 1 and the number 2 seed, two teams with good offenses and even better defenses. And I think if you can beat both of those teams, imagine the confidence boost going into the conference title weekend where you're probably going to face a division foe in the Detroit Lions. And it's hard to beat a team twice in a year. The Lions have already beat the Packers twice, and I think the Packers will be in
Beat them once.
beat them once. Well,
Yeah.
regardless, it's hard to beat a team twice. I think Green Bay would be in a good position to pull off another upset. And imagine if they go to the Super Bowl, beating the number 1, 2, and 3 seeds in the NFC. Absolutely insane. And I think this is more so of a prediction. I think if I had to bet money on it, bet my life on it, San Fran, of course, is the pick. But if Green Bay wins this weekend, I'm going to take Green Bay because I think that confidence boost is going to be too much heading into conference title weekend. But of
Yeah, I
course,
mean, yeah, and like I talked about it earlier how the key to Tampa Bay beating Detroit is pressuring Jared Goff. Seeing Green Bay and Detroit match up on Thanksgiving and seeing what Green Bay did to that Lions O line, I mean they pressured Jared Goff crazy, sent pressure stunts. Even set 4-man rushes and was still getting back there, and they absolutely dominated that game. And Jordan Love carved up Detroit secondary, which I think he really could do again.
yeah, that was really like the start. Thanksgiving was kind of the start of when Jordan Love started to turn that page and look like a completely different quarterback that I predicted, by the way, to be relevant. Amir, me and you after the season, we're gonna have to go through and start ranking positions. Maybe we'll have to make an episode where we rank the top 5 or top 10 at every position. That's actually a great idea. So be on the lookout for that coming up. Maybe Pro Bowl weekend. But that is ultimately going to do it here for today's video. Again, probably a shorter episode today. But regardless, again, that's what happens when the season gets, farther and farther down the line. But Amir, any last thoughts about this weekend coming up? And of course, I do want to throw it out there. If any injuries happen, any big injuries, be on the lookout on my Instagram. We might change a pick or two. But Amir, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a great weekend of football. I'm not as motivated because my Browns aren't in it. I thought the Browns would be able to beat Houston, and eventually the injuries were going to catch up to us. I just didn't think it would be this past week, and as bad as it was. But I'm still gonna watch it. I'm still gonna enjoy it, because in reality, it's only a couple more weeks of football left.
So we have a special guest joining the show. This, of course, was not in the plans, but Bakari Steve, he was on the show Tuesday, and of course, 2 Tuesdays in a row. Bakari, I'm going to ask you this weekend then. I mean, who do you got this weekend? You just joined the show randomly, but let's go rapid fire. Let's get your picks here. Who you taking?
Okay, I got you.
Who are you going to take in the Baltimore and Houston matchup this weekend?
I think that's going to be an exciting matchup. I'm going to take Baltimore because Baltimore has looked unstoppable, for majority of the season. And I think I want to shout out Lamar because a lot of people are going to question his MVP legitimacy. But I just want to say that sometimes MVP it doesn't translate into stats, but team performance. And I think the captain of this team is undoubtedly Lamar Jackson, and the defense is legit. But I am expecting CJ Stroud to ball out. But I'm going to take Baltimore in that one.
All right. What do you think about Green Bay and San Fran on Saturday night?
Same thing, except I'm going to take San Fran, of course. Jordan Love. I know you've been high on Jordan Love since he was drafted. Madden franchise legend for you, but unfortunately, I think his run is going to end right here. And I'm going to give that to San Fran.
Okay, for Detroit and Tampa Bay, I think interesting matchup here. You can make an argument either way. Which direction are you going to go here?
The direction I want to go is Tampa Bay. I want Tampa Bay to pull it off. I want to see Baker get to the NFC championship. That would be insane. But my heart's telling me that another game at Ford Field with the fans behind this Detroit team, they're going to be powered up enough to at least get past this Tampa Bay Bucks team. So I'm gonna go with Detroit for the simple fact that they'll have the home fans behind them.
And then finally, we have the Buffalo KC matchup. What route are you going for there?
That's going to be a tough one. I like the way Buffalo has played down the stretch. Obviously, they had so much adversity to overcome at tail end of the season. You know, they were out of the playoff picture almost entirely, and here they are, you know, in the second round of the playoffs. They took care of business against Pittsburgh. I expect this to be another classic Buffalo Kansas City game. I want to take Buffalo in that. You know, we obviously know how Pat Mahomes it seems like this whole Kansas City team just turns it up in the second half of the season, especially in the playoffs. But I feel like Josh Allen is finally going to get past Pat Mahomes in the playoffs this one time.
So you agree with us this weekend. Of course, we dove deeper into it early in the episode. Last thing I want your thoughts on here. What are your thoughts on my predictions here for as far as the upset of the week, the hot take, player of the week, and my Super Bowl favorite?
This is crazy.
Let me see. The upset of the week, you got Green Bay and San Fran. You know, I guess, you know, I won't count anything out with that because we just seen Green Bay absolutely slaughter Dallas. So, you know, if they just happen to beat San Fran, you might need to quit podcasting and hold a genie bottle and charge people to read their future because that would be insane.
Yeah, I mean, the hot take, Jordan Love's gonna have 4 touchdowns this weekend.
The hot take, if you would have told me that it was like CJ Stroud or Baker throwing for 4+, I would definitely like that. But 4+ touchdowns, I mean, he's on a hot streak, but 4+ is insane. But I guess you got to ride with your upset of the week.
Yeah,
and I mean, you got everything just Jordan Love and Packers related. So, you know, obviously
this may need to get Jordan Love tatted on his face.
Yeah. Hey, where's the jersey? I'm surprised you're not wearing the jersey for this episode.
Man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, no. If you're still listening at home, man, let me tell you something. Amir and I, we had no idea that Bakari was going to join this episode, and he just randomly joined. So completely off guard, and yeah, I mean, he didn't get a break. He didn't even get to ease into it. We just bombarded him with questions early on.
But you know, it's crazy. I'd actually planned to surprise drop in at the very beginning of the pod, but I was busy with some stuff I had to do. You're lucky that didn't happen because I was just going to be sitting here waiting.
Oh, that's crazy. That maybe next weekend, if you're free on Thursday or Wednesday night, we'll have to dive into the conference title weekend. But Bakari, I guess any last thoughts before we get out of here? We were just about to wrap up the show.
No, I'm expecting some real good football this weekend. You know, there's some unorthodox matchups. Obviously, some matchups we didn't see coming into this second round of the playoffs. But I'm excited nonetheless. I think these should be a lot closer caliber of games than, you know, we saw in the first round. We saw a couple of blowouts. But I'm excited to see which teams, you know, advance.
All right, and then Amir, I'm going to circle back to you because originally, you know, you might have to bring this up with Bakari off the pod because this was your show. And he had his time on Tuesday. You know, hopefully it doesn't cause any beef between you two. But again,
I just want to say I'm the original co-host. I was doing 2 a week.
Oh man, that's awesome. But I mean that's probably gonna do it here for the show. We're gonna go get on the game. And then final thoughts on this weekend. For me, go Jordan Love. Jordan Love, of course, is the best player in the NFL.